let me introduce our opening talk of the day, which is about how to increase the pace of delivery. Many organizations are creating internal technology platforms. However, not everything will go as planned, and our product teams are often unhappy with what platform team has to offer. So for this talk, which is about how to manage your platform as a product, we have our guest from Australia, Melbourne, Evan Butcher, who is the head of engineering for Thoughtworks Australia. And Evan is an experienced hands-on technical leader with more than 2 decades of experience building and integrating systems, providing clients with advice on technology strategy, enterprise architecture, and software delivery practice. So I'm so eager to hear your talk today, Evan. Let's kick off the day.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. While I just get my equipment in place. Yes, thank you so much. And I don't need to, it's such a comprehensive introduction, I don't need to repeat myself to tell you who I am. But as a lot of my work in the last 15 years at Thoughtworks and before that in the industry has been around architecture and systems, it's also, I've had a very, very strong interest in the way that modern engineering organizations are designed and how they put together and how we construct the organization that delivers systems and services that service our customers. That's always been a very, very strong interest of mine. And the some of my experience in dealing with platforms and delivering services, in 2018, I published an article. It took me a couple of years to put it together, but I published an article on martinfowler.com. My colleague Martin Fowler has a very popular website and has lots of resources on it. And I was fortunate enough to be able to publish this article about experiences with establishing platform teams. So internal organizations that service internal customers and some defining things in that space. So, and it was very popular, and it's actually had some resurgence in popularity. I found more recently because the book that was published last year, started last year, the end of the year before, called Team Topologies by Manuel Paye and Matthew Skelton, referenced some of my work in there and the definitions of what makes a good platform, and they used it in their very important work around team structures. So, and I'll come back to some of that definition stuff in a sec. But around this time, I feel the need to explain what am I talking about in this talk when I talk about platform, because that word has become quite diffused. It's become quite confusing, but it still has a very, very important role to play. And some of those definitions include, on the left of the screen, we talk about platform businesses, organizations like Uber or eBay that offer services and products that allow multiple parties to come together and make use of that platform to exchange value, but not necessarily selling directly to the customers. So you're providing that platform for the exchange of value. On the far right, we have, well, those technical products and services that are put in places like Heroku or Salesforce or AWS, which are platforms as a service. So that's another use of the word platform there. There are many more, but really in this talk, we're talking about this trend, this industry trend of organizations at scale establishing internal platform teams. A couple of examples here, Netflix, who famously have talked about their internal paved roads, their teams that establish internal products that allow engineering at scale. And here in Australia, we have a global organization called Atlassian, headquartered in Australia, I should say. And they write about their platform engineering capability and their internal products. And one of the famous ones there is Micros, which supports deployment of infrastructure at scale. If I explore that a little bit more, it's common to think about organizations as a collection of capabilities. And those capabilities are what your organization does in service of its mission, and generally to service your customers. And so this is a very, very simplistic view, but it's starting to think about those tiers of capability. How do you think about the way these capabilities are organized in your organization. At the front of the organization is the customers. They're making direct use of product features and that's your purpose is to deliver those product features to your customers and partners, or in a more rich model it would be B2B and B2C and other things like that. Think about it, it's just your customers are making use of that first tier, that front tier of product capabilities. Quite often we think of those as product features, the ability to find a car to rent if you're a ride sharing or a car rental organization, or list something to be sold as a product feature. In the middle, we have those shared business capabilities, things that support multiple product lines, and organizations bring those things together with the idea that they can get better utilization and reuse across multiple product lines and move faster and lower cost. And at the bottom of the organization, at this model, we have those technology capabilities where developers and engineering teams can deploy applications or make use of resilient storage and things like that. So these capabilities come in these tiers. And we often call these the back end and middle end of an organization. In reality, when we're talking about this idea of an internal platform, if you think of it this way, we're talking about those bottom two tiers. They exist in order to make it easier, faster, safer to deliver new product features and product capabilities to our customers. And that's the reason they exist. They don't exist, for any other purpose. And many organizations arrange those in a way that causes delays and dependencies, because delivering a product feature requires significant change across all of those internal platforms. And depending on how you arrange them, it can cause quite a lot of friction in your organization's delivery of those top level product features and capabilities. Okay, so explore that a little bit. In my article, I included a quote, and I'm just going to read it out. A digital platform, really what I meant was a good digital platform and a good internal platform is a foundation of self-service APIs, tools, services, knowledge, and support, which are arranged as a compelling internal product. And that's been picked up and used elsewhere, such as I mentioned team topologies, but I think it has some useful aspects. And when we're thinking about using this lens, and we were thinking about those platform capabilities, we're thinking about how teams are arranged. And so at the bottom end, you may have some teams that are arranged around these technology platforms. And what they're doing is they're servicing. They are in service of business platform teams and product teams. And the business platform teams are in service of the product teams. And so we can think about this as teams that are arranged around those groupings of capability. And I think that's useful when we start to think about what it means to be a compelling product, which we'll come back to in a sec. So I'll pick out a few things from my definition. The first one that I'd like to highlight is self-service. And this talks to how those internal teams, your customers, if you're one of those platform teams, how they make use of our platform products and services. Instead of being potentially a part of a release train where we do joint planning and have to make changes in unison, perhaps we can move to more of the platform's most commonly used services to be self-service. So we don't actually have to do as much strict coordination and coupling of effort and that move away from that release train. A second aspect is talking about how the platform isn't just some software or infrastructure installed. It needs to be more than that. You can't just, a common way of thinking about this is you can't install the platform and have it be successful. It needs to come with significant knowledge, support. It may be made up of tools or services. In fact, it may not even be any software or infrastructure that's installed. It may just be an offering that's purely around knowledge and support and able to be used by those product teams. And the last aspect here is that I think is most relevant to the topic today is that it needs to be a compelling internal product. And that the word compelling implies that in order to be successful, it must be attractive to use. It must solve some compelling problem. And in many organizations, as they scale, delivery teams aren't forced to use the platform offerings. Platform offerings are competing And it may be that the delivery teams, may be able to make use of public cloud offerings or other SaaS products, and the platform offering has to actually provide some compelling alternative to other offerings that the delivery teams could use. And the last bit there is that it's a product. This hints that we should be thinking of it in the way that we think about our external products, but just focused more on those inward customers. And we'll dig into that a little bit more shortly. Okay. So in my consulting in the last few years, we've bumped into lots of problems as organizations have tried to establish these platform teams, and we've tried to help people put in place solutions to those problems. And of course, we've collected up lots and lots of stories, and I've anonymized some quotes here just to give you some sense of what we hear from those platform customers. The first one here is, we looked at what the platform engineering team had built, but it really didn't seem to solve our problem. And it's really common for product teams to assess what the platform engineering team or their internal platform team has made available, and look at it and say, this actually doesn't solve our problem. They've really missed the mark. We thought that it was going to be a solution, but we've actually looked at it and it's not. And we need to now build our own solution around it. And this is actually really, really common. An example that I've bumped into is where internal technology platform teams have set up hosting platforms. They've gone straight into building a Kubernetes platform with a fully automated deployment pipeline, and you can deploy containerized applications in seconds into the cloud. But actually, the biggest problem, if you went around and looked at many of the internal delivery teams, was that they had limited access to data, or test data that's cleansed from production, and that's limiting their environments. Or the actual applications that attempting to be deployed are not actually containerized. They're not suitable for deployment on this shiny new deployment platform. So it's missed the mark somewhat. And so the first point here is to really do some research on your customers and try to understand your customers' needs really well. Understand what they're facing and what you can offer to do that. You won't hit everybody's needs, but if you use product management techniques, then you'll do that understanding. And it starts with customer research. And I am not a user experience expert or a service designer. I am an engineer and an architect by trade, but I've been involved in some of these efforts, and it's been fascinating for me how transferable product management techniques are to these internal platforms, even when they're quite technical in nature. One of the techniques that I like to point to people to is this one. It's quite commonly used in product management and user experience, and this is a value proposition canvas developed by an organization called Strategizer. But on the right-hand side, it gives us an opportunity with our research and our interviewing and co-creation to understand who our customer is and what they're trying to do. In the case of these internal customers, they are probably product owners and delivery teams that are trying to ship product features. And what are they trying to do? What have they got that works really well for them, those gains and those things that they have? And what are the things that are holding them back, the pains? And then you could use that to evaluate, do we understand for the products that we may offer, how those map to, that we can have gain creators that map to the gains that they already have, that enhance those gains, and pain relievers that will take away some of the pain that those internal teams are facing. And a really important aspect is that is to add to this potentially the idea of user journeys. So understanding what are the step-by-step tasks that internal teams, developers, engineers, testers, product owners need to do to ship a product feature, and be able to understand and map those pain points against those, so you can understand that you're tackling the right parts of the most common problems, the most important problems, and that you can build your product successfully around that, and they'll drive your own success. In the team topologies book, there's a really important concept of team cognitive load. And when I think about those pain relievers that platform offerings and platform products are going to do, they basically fall into these two categories. They either reduce the burden for product delivery teams by taking away the need to understand as much. That cognitive load is how many domains of information, how much depth of knowledge, how many areas can you possibly be expert in within a reasonably sized team. So taking away some of that need to understand complex pricing algorithms or complex hosting mechanisms reduces the burden. A lot of people get that right. They want to take that away and make it easier. But the other gap is it needs to be balanced with the teams that you're offering these products to. You need to measure that you're improving their flow of value. You need to make them go faster, or at least as fast as they are now, while reducing their burden and allowing them to operate better at scale. When teams, a common failing is to not really focus on these metrics, on these two areas when you're thinking about around shaping the proposition. And even I've seen teams that focus very much inwardly on cost reduction or speed to market for platform features, but not really thinking about how the product features they're delivering, how they impact the effectiveness of the product teams in these two categories. I think that's a really important thing to work on. Another example of a quote that's been altered to protect the innocent. We were told to use the platform. We were told we'll give it a mandate. You must use this, but it really wasn't ready. It didn't have all the features, or they weren't stable or reliable or available. And so we wasted a lot of time evaluating that product. We didn't have any clear signal of whether it's ready or not. There was no support in place. There's no help there. It was maybe perhaps it was actually hardwired to the very first consumer's needs, which is not a bad strategy, but it's not ready for general use. And so the philosophy here is don't overpromise too early around your platform offerings, and don't break your promises once you've established a platform. And it's very difficult to do because we all want to be successful and drive adoption, but I think it also needs this product management mindset of a life cycle. So we've had some luck or developed some traction with introducing this idea of a platform product life cycle, a basic product development life cycle, but just transposed into how would this work for internal products. And as per any product lifecycle, you would start with some experiments to explore whether there's even a thing that's valuable here, potentially an alpha phase, which would allow you to assess feasibility and desirability. You're doing that with a small group of users, beta, and then general availability when it's really well supported and ready to scale. And if we go on to think about how many people are going to be engaged in this process, an experiment, you're really just going to be finding an early adopter, someone who's really aligned in wanting to establish this capability, this product. And then that scales up to where you may have an open beta within your organization of several teams, but not too many that you can't pivot and change direction if need be, or even to abandon it. If you decide that it's not actually a successful platform product, then you can transition its ownership. And general availability is its readiness to go organization wide. And we sort of think of this as tags against platform services that are really clear and visible and transparent to platform customers, that they come along and say, okay, I really need this hosting thing, but I can see that it's on the roadmap. I can see it's only at alpha stage. I don't think I'm keen enough to jump on board with that. And another aspect of this, and the team topologies book introduced these 3 interaction modes. It talks about 4 main team topologies, actually patterns for how to form a team, one of which is platform team, and these 3 interaction modes, starting from collaboration, working closely together, to X as a service, which is around providing something without requiring a lot of collaboration, and facilitating, which is about joining forces to enable a team to get past something, a temporary kind of nature, and facilitating that rather than collaborating and maintaining separation. But the first 2 are very, very relevant to this conversation. And if we map those to our platform product lifecycle, you can see that at the start, the left side of this, when we're doing those experimentations, when we're establishing that alpha, we're going to be doing a lot of collaboration. I often talked about this as platform joint ventures, where you're not going to be standing back and building something and waiting till they make use of it. You're actually going to be building it together, probably joining forces and sitting together to build that in a virtual sense, of course, in 2021. But the further you go to the right, and you want to scale this out to many teams within your organizations, then you need to introduce more and more of that interaction mode of X as a service, where those teams can make use of it with a clear idea of how to use it, how documents, read the documentation, make use of the APIs, the portals, visibility of the status of the service without having to interact at a human level, just to be able to scale and make that available. So I thought that was really valuable, and it has really helped illustrate for some of our teams how that changes over time. Mapping that further to the types of humans that you may require in your team during this life cycle. At the start, when you're doing experimentation, you'll be heavier on those competencies around exploration, rapid innovation. The people who will be like, this is good enough. Is this good enough to get going? Is this safe to use, but will but allow us to move on? But as a product gets established, you're going to change those focus areas. They may even require changes of the humans in your teams, careful evolution, taking care of your users, offering really good customer service, a slower pace of change. And sometimes the same people are not the people who should be establishing a service as should be running it once it's at scale. And not paying attention to that can cause us some real problems. Okay. Another quote, they've been building these services for a long time, and meanwhile we had to move forward. It's a similar variant to the others, but it's saying we had to build our own solution for these problems because we could not see when it would be ready. And a very common aspect of that is that the platform team feels the need to establish a significant chunk of product value before going to their internal market and releasing it. It's very common in regular product development for our external customers as well, that we want to polish and develop enough capability, and we're afraid to do those early testing. I think that Lifecycle helps. This advice, and this comes from the Team Topologies book as well. Thank you to those authors for giving us such great framings. We're talking about that MVP, that minimum viable product. Team Topologies calls that the thinnest viable platform. And I really like that. So I'm going to use it here as well. And one of the examples that's talked about during that early stage of experiment and alpha, you may not actually need to establish any software at all. The thinnest viable platform, as Matthew Skelton has said, may be a wiki page that has a list of the recommended tools and cloud services that can be used. That wiki page still kind of ticks the boxes in terms of a platform service. It reduces the cognitive load for the teams that want to use it, because they don't have to go and do assessment of 400,000 Amazon services. They can look at a list of 20 that people have already done that work for. And it can be combined with consulting and customer service aspects to enable the team to make use of it in a self-service way without having to and to move faster, which improves flow. Your platform services probably already, if they exist, they're probably already much more than that. But this idea and this philosophy of seeking to ship that early value, to identify the simplest thing that would get established, working with those smaller groups in that alpha stage, proving value, and then broadening the scope of the platform is really important. And that should lead to a good outcome. And we, in this same theme of keeping the platform as thin and as focused as possible, we talk about we extend that platform product lifecycle. The idea here is the platform shouldn't just be append only. It shouldn't just accrue more services over time. We need a way of refreshing the offerings. And we talk about like a platform may have multiple products that offer the same capability. Today, we might offer hosting on templatized Amazon's ECS, to use technical examples. We may be exploring and be doing an alpha or even beta of a newer product that services that same capability. We might have a Kubernetes and service mesh, shiny new technology, and those two may coexist. But over time, the older things that are no longer used need to move into this mode of being deprecated. and being really clear and transparent and doing that product management, you need to say, actually, we're going to sunset this product and we're going to deprecate it. We're not going, in the future, we're not going to support it, and give people that really clear signal. And then moving from deprecated to removed is an interesting extension of that problem. And we talked about those 3 interaction modes earlier, and the last one, which is facilitating, that actually may be a role or an interaction mode for a platform to offer capacity, offer humans who can go and help as experts to product teams that are using your deprecated products, things that are no longer the shiny new things. And by offering that capacity, you can accelerate their migration off that and allow you to remove that product offering altogether. And that's something that's been quite successful. An organization I've worked with has established a team that just did that, to move, to essentially go out into product teams and help them migrate off an old CI/CD build server and onto their newer offering, because without the extra capacity, those product teams were never going to get there. So managing as a product means keeping focus, keeping a smallest number of high quality products, not just having a complete sprawl of everything that you've ever had. And so that strategy around deprecation is really, really key to improve, to focus on. So I'm coming to the end of this little tale of some of the experiences I've had. I'll come through and summarize again, some of these key points. I just want to leave you with some sharp messages. The first is understand your customers, know who they are, go and talk to them, understand what they need, understand what they do day to day and where their pain points are. Those are internal people, your colleagues, and understand how they're servicing your ultimate customer, and then be clear with what your offering is, identify it and be clear on what value it's offering. Always be looking for those opportunities to reduce their burden, or increase their flow of value, or some combination of those two, and be clear on that. And the second one was, don't break your promises. Don't set expectations too high, too early around the readiness of services, and be really clear what customers can expect from that product at a particular point in time as it evolves. And start with something small and simple that is useful, improves value, and evolve from there, rather than going away and spending 6 months of establishing a whole bunch of product services before you even use them with a customer in the first place. Okay, that's it. That's my talk. Thank you so much for attending. It's been fun to pull together some of these lessons from the last little while. I'm going to stay on the Slack for the next half hour in the channel. And I'll answer any questions you've got, or even beyond that. If anyone has questions, I'll do my best to answer. Thank you very much for your time.